Good morning, y'all. We're headed to Steinwaldberg, Weißenstein, also known as the Weißenstein Ruins. It's like a little castle located about 25 miles southwest of the Czech border. What's up, y'all? Made it on ground close to the castle. The closest parking I could find is about a mile or 1.4 kilometers away from the site. We'll just have to hike over to the top. The trail through the castle kind of winds through these woods. It's a little bit windy today, about 40 degrees Fahrenheit, but not too bad for the 31st of January. Check out this ancient, all-original wood patio. The exact date of this castle's construction is not known. However, it was likely in the late 1200s because a document in 1279 shows that Wolf de Weißenstein, which is the family that this castle and this land around originally belonged to, transferred goods. He was a witness. He was a witness in the transfer of goods to the Nothaft family. Nothaft represents a line of Bavarian nobles that is traceable to Radipole of Egmont. Radipole is noted for a couple of things. He fought for Charlemagne, and also he built the Weißenstein Castle in 797. So Wolf de Weißenstein noted in the document in 1279 that shows the transfer of goods to the Nothafts, we deduced that the castle was likely built in the late 1200s. Castle at that time was also known as a Blockwerk, which just simply means the castle it was like a small castle with the keep or a tower, which you see behind me there. In the 1300s, Nothafts that I mentioned earlier began to take more possession of this land. Before, it was mainly the Wolfs de Weißensteins that owned this castle and the land, but in the early 1300s, the Nothafts family began to take more possession of it. It was ceded to Albert Nothaft the Sixth, and in 1333, Albrecht the 11th, who was Albert the Sixth's son, was granted fiefdom by the Roman-German king at the time, Ludwig the Fourth, despite Albert siding with Frederick the Fair of Austria in rights of the throne. At that time, Ludwig the Fourth was recently excommunicated by the Papal Church and likely saw this as a way to strengthen the ties of his kingdom. By 1341, construction of the castle reached its full potential. And the castle, while small compared to other castles that we see in Central Europe, was actually rather large compared to other castles in the Upper Palatine region. Stahlweinberg stayed in the Nothaft family until 1718 and stayed in the hands of relatives of the Nothaft family beyond that, up until the 1800s. The reason why it stayed in the hands of the Nothaft family for so long is likely due to the Gannerschaft agreement that was formed by their family in 1464. Essentially, this agreement says that the family is entitled to take care of the castle and the grounds and the land around it, and no heir within the family alone could own the property. However, in other words, they had to share it between the heirs until it ultimately was sold later in the 1800s. In 1565, we think, is when the castle began to fall into disrepair. This was because Hans Nothaft he owned a farm in Poppenreuth, which is about 10 miles from here. 10 miles, about 15 kilometers from here. And he gave most of his attention to the farm. So the people that worked here, the people that worked for the Nothaft family and kept all the grounds, were opposed to his decision, but ultimately could do nothing about it. And that's where we began to see the disrepair that the castle went in toward today. The castle ultimately left the hands of the Nothaft family in 1882, and Bianca Eisenhardt purchased it. Bianca Eisenhardt dies 3 years later, and Gustav Siegel purchases it. Gustav Siegel is an entrepreneur at the time. He owns a paint factory. He's a chemist, and it's basically stayed in his family ever since then, just through a different last name. So his daughter Dora married her husband, whose last name, he's part of the Hornberg family, in 1918, and it's remained part of the Hornberg family ever since. Between 1996 and 2000, the grounds around here underwent some construction to allow the castle to be more accessible by the public. And that basically brings us up to where we are today. That statue I showed you down there, made by Engelhard Suess, was made in 2009, and that's been about the most recent addition to this cool little castle. Add in those comments where you want to see next, and we'll see you in future videos. Take care. Imagine shooting an arrow from here to that way. It would just go like, wouldn't touch the ground for like a couple minutes.